Hey everyone, thanks for signing up for this seminar on the Quartz torch fabrication. Unfortunately on Monday we couldn't use open flame, so I'm back here at Seco East Coast here in Sanford. Make a quick video for you guys to actually see how it's made. You should have my contact information, so if you have any questions at any time whenever you're trying to make one, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Here we go. Alright, so we're going to start with 5 pins like I said. We're going to start with the middle one, we're going to flare it out, and then we're going to flare out the other 4 around it. You can notice sometimes the pins will pop up, that's usually because of moisture. Let it cool down a little bit for you guys to see. So the middle one's flared up. Now we're going to flare up the other 4. Like I said, flare them up as far as possible. That way you can go ahead and seal the glass together. Alright, we got those flared up, so just go in between each flare, make sure there's no air in there. Like I said, if there's any air, then your hydrogen and oxygen will mix, and torch will most likely explode at that point. Alright, now that we got those 5 attached, we're going to go ahead and put the braces on the pins. This is why you start with 5, so that you can brace that middle pin. I did lower my fire a little bit because you don't want to restrict that tubing whenever you're doing this. Just make sure you get a good seal in there. I'm using a 1mm rod to do this. Like I said before, this is a 00 tip. Might be a little bit difficult to see, but I put my 2 seals right in between, one here and one right there. I'm gonna go ahead and go back up on top. Alright, now that my middle pin is sealed, I'm gonna go ahead and put the other 2 pins in to make it a 7-jet. That one's a little bit tight, so I'm not going to use it. Chances are it's going to end up breaking. Try to get this 7th one in there again. There we go. Alright, so we're going to, put a sharper fire back on the torch. And we're going to flare those last two out to meet the other 5. That one popped up on me, stayed up, so I'm just gonna push it back down. So you want to hit right in the middle, start that flare, go to the outside, and just make it bigger until you come down and meet the rest of the glass. There we go. So now that you have that, that flower shape, you have everything sealed together, just go ahead and double check to make sure, go in between each one, make sure there's no pinholes. That one's good. Just go around. Make sure the outsides are sealed also. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to take our rod and fill in the outside. Well, actually first, sorry about that, we got to brace the rest of the pins around the outside. So just start one by one. Alright, so now we got all the pins braced together. I'll move the lens here and show you what we've got. Let's see. Sorry, it's a bit out of focus, but down here, like I said, as close to the graphite jig as possible. Just around each outside. There's a brace in there. It's hard to see, but I assure you it's there. Alright, now we're going to go around the outside. In between each one you can see this like little indentation. We got to fill that in, make this whole thing a circle. For this I'm using a 1.5 mil rod. So kind of push it in there, work it in, make sure you work out the top and the bottom. Like I said, you do not want any pinholes in this. Don't mind my shakiness. You know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning here. Just had some coffee. Feeling it start to kick in a little bit. Make sure everything's worked out good. Got one more here. All right, there we go. We got, you know, sort of a circle, but we're gonna have to run another weld around it anyways to build that lip up to attach the tube. At this point here, like I keep saying, make sure there's no air. I go around, you're gonna create some bloom doing this, so it's also a chance to burn away the bloom. See right there, a little hole. Let's go around the whole circle. Alright, so we created something that looks like a circle. So now I'm gonna start working on that lip for the 8x12 tubing. So on this, I like to start on the back side. It's just easier for me, whatever your preference is. You want to stay on the outside, but you also want to build height also.
What's up? What the fuck you doing?
Alright, sorry about that little pause there. Another employee came up and didn't want to distract. So I got a little bit of a bead run, probably maybe about a quarter of the length. See, it's not, once again, you got to go around, you got to seal this all in. We'll do that afterwards, but I do a little bit at a time, rotate it. I do suggest wearing gloves while you're doing this. Probably burn your pinky up if you don't. Because it is so small, you gotta take it slow. Make sure you do not restrict those other pins. Alright, so there we got a little bead ran around the whole thing. So now just go through, make sure it's soaked in really well. You're going to have a bunch of start-stop points. Very critical points to make sure they're sealed together. You will have to go on the back side also to seal this. Right now I'm just doing this top. Go around, make sure everything's uniform, just looks good, makes it easier in the end. Each one of these steps, you're going to create bloom. I like to just go ahead and burn it away after each step. If you want to use acid, that's fine, it's up to you. But fire is much quicker to do that. Alright, so this one should be pretty good. So burn away all that bloom inside. Alright, I'll remove the lens here and let you guys see up close what it looks like now. So there you can see the 7 jets. There you go. Made the circle around the top. Looks like it should be pretty close to the size of 8x12 tubing. You can just go ahead and check it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. It gives me room to run a weld around that also. So at this point, we're ready to go ahead and move over to a lathe to attach that 8x12. Alright, now that we're over here at the lathe, I got my 8x12 on one side. I decided just to go ahead and chuck the whole jig, that way you know it's running straight. Bring this in, check how they line up. You're gonna have some gaps. You can see that the 8x12 is a little bit smaller. Sorry, I can't. There you go. The 8x12 is a little bit smaller. Just to be sure I don't touch any of those pinholes, I'm gonna go ahead and flare this 8x12 a little bit so that it meets that size. Alright, so the tube's not straight, so we're going to go ahead and straighten that up first. Just heat up back here a little bit. I switched over to a 1 tip. Alright, and now we're going to go ahead and flare that tube up to meet the size of the 7-jet. Alright, so now that we got that flare on that 8x12, go ahead and bring it back in here, see how it lines up. Looks much better there. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to make this first bead up on top. I'm using a 2 mil rod. I have that 1 tip still on here. You don't want to put too much pressure down because you don't want to restrict the pins. There we go. I did about a quarter of the way around. Go back through, make sure it's sealed pretty good. That should be good there. At this point, let it cool down a little bit, and we're going to pull the pins out of the jig. Sometimes it breaks and you got to start over. Hopefully that doesn't happen here. There we go. Back it away, and now just turn the lathe. Do a quarter at a time, just because you don't want to get it too hot and then your pins will drop, because you only have a quarter of that done right now. Take your time, melt it all together, make sure there's no pinholes like I've told you 100 times already. Let it cool down a little bit, spin it a little bit more. Run another bead on there. And one more time to finish that up. Alright, so now that we got the pins attached to the 8x12, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the lathe to see if it's running true. That looks pretty good. That's something we can work with. Alright, so now we're going to make that outer shell. I took the jig out of this side here. We no longer need it. I'm going to use, this is 12 by 16. Seems to fit over this pretty tight. I mentioned before, you can't slide it the whole way through. You got to create that bubble in there. So go ahead and put this 12 by 16 in the lathe. Give yourself a little bit of room. Go ahead and back this, back the 7 jets out of the way, because you're gonna need to put fire on this. Use the graphite rod, make a little bubble on it. Make sure you start at the very end. You got to open up the whole thing from the very end to about there, just wherever you feel that you have enough room to bring it back down to meet the 8x12. Alright, we're going to go ahead and start this flare. I changed over to a 6 tip. Might be a little bit overkill, but it's what I had right beside me, so that's what I'm going to use. I would recommend probably cutting this straight if it's, you know, your first time or something. Start at the end. Get it where you want it. Something like that looks pretty good. Make sure your graphite, you can see it glowing here. If you get it too hot, it's gonna stick to the glass. So make sure you have multiple rods around you and just go ahead and change them out. Dip it in water, whatever you need to do. I'm gonna go ahead and change it out. So I started with that end with the flare. Gonna work my way in here. Start to flare a little bit more. Do a nice flare, about the size of the belly you're looking to make. That's probably pretty good. Okay. Straighten it back out. And see the graphite's glowing again. I'm gonna dip it in water. Pull it off a little bit. Go back on it. I'm gonna go in this angle at the top and start pushing out the glass to make that bubble that I want. Make sure the glass can get wobbly on you, so use the graphite rod at the top to kind of keep it straight a little bit. If it starts to get too bad, pull your fire out, let it cool down, straighten it up. See, I'm starting to make this bubble. There, you see it's starting to get wobbly. Stick your graphite rod in there a little bit inside the tube and straighten out the whole thing again. Get it hot. Go ahead and straighten it out. Keep tipping your rod so it doesn't stick. Take your time with this. I like my bubbles to be a little bit on the bigger side. Other people I know, they'll make it and it'll be pretty flat. Like I said, this 6 tip is a little bit much. Probably should have listened to the guy recording and used a 5 or a 4. But you know, us younger guys like to be stubborn and do our own thing and not listen. Alright, so now that we got this bubble made, it's probably not big enough, so I might have to go back in, but I'm going to go ahead and turn the speed off, bring in the 7 jets, and see if it goes through. It does, just barely made it through. You're going to bring that in as far as it goes, be very careful, bump up against, and then back out a little bit. You need to back it out to have room for the hydrogen to go through this outer shell. So now I'm going to turn the lathe back on, and I'm gonna heat up this very edge here, and I'm gonna start to bring it back down close to the tubing. I am going to go ahead and change out my tip because I don't want to heat up this tubing too much and get everything hopping inside of that shell. So I'm going to change out to a 4, and then I'll show you how to bring it back down. Alright, I went ahead and changed out my tip. A 3 tip was the closest thing I could find, so I'm just going to go ahead and use that. Put my glove on here. It's always wise to wear gloves when working with quartz, using a much hotter fire, and you don't want to get sweat or anything on this tubing. So I'm going to go ahead and heat up just this edge. And I'm going to bring it back down. We're going to do it slowly. Like I said before, this 8x12, you don't want to get that hot. So just take your time with this. Like to have a little point on your graphite. Gives it a nice angle. You can rest it on this 8x12 and then just use the angle and, you know, just rest it on it. Let the glass will do its own thing. Come back down. Like I mentioned before, some people like to make a Maria That's actually how I was taught, but like I mentioned a minute ago, us younger guys like to be stubborn, so bring it down as close as possible without touching the tube. That looks pretty good there. Alright, now that I got that pretty close, I'm just gonna run a weld on that outside. Probably gonna use the 2mm rod again. So I'm gonna change out my tip again to a number 1. And then I'll show you that part. Alright, so I switched over my tips. I now have the 1 tip back on. I'm gonna use a 2mm rod again. And I'm gonna run a weld around this outside. Gonna run probably try to get about between 1/3 and 1/2 of the tube welded here. There we go. Run it out, make it look pretty. Later on you can hook air up to it if you want to, blow it out. Alright, so I got that weld, a little bead ran around there. A very, very important part here, I forgot to mention this whenever we had that little walkthrough on Monday. Since we have this bead on here, you know, lathes don't always, there's a little bit of play in a chuck. So we're gonna go ahead and loosen this side up. Not a lot, just a little bit. That will keep, whenever I'm spinning it, it'll keep one side from moving more than the other side. It'll keep this weld from snapping. So just loosen that up a little bit, and then we can go ahead and spin it by hand. Keep running that bead around there until you're the whole way around it. Just little by little, take your time. Try not to push into that 8x12 too much. But make sure it is blended. Make sure there's no air holes there. You don't want your hydrogen leaking out this back side and then igniting behind on the outside of the torch. You're going to have these start-stop points. Make sure they're blended out really well. Spin it again. And then run this last little bit right here. That's some moisture that you hear inside of the shell out in front of the 7 pins. Alright, there we go. I'm pretty confident that there's no little air bubbles in there. Alright, so I went ahead and pulled the whole shell out. I'm gonna round, since this tube is a little bit shorter for the shell, I'm gonna round bottom this edge instead of pulling it off. Like I said, I pull it off, that way whenever you're blowing out all of your seals, you don't have to put, you know, quartz tape or anything on, or a plug on this side here. So I'm gonna turn the lathe on, just heat up. Doesn't have to be pretty, I'm just sealing that up. I still have this one tip on there. Probably go ahead and change out to something a little bit bigger. Sorry it's taking me a minute here, like I said. Probably should have changed out the tip. It's got a little hole in the end. I'm just gonna go ahead and just run a bead in there, just fill it in. Probably be a little bit quicker. Be careful though, because you don't have any holes in this, so your air inside the shell is going to expand with the heat. So that should be good there. So now I'm going to come up on top of this tube. On top of your shell, you're going to pull a hole. You can, if you want to hook air up to it and blow a hole, you can. I'm just gonna go ahead and pull a hole right there, right in the middle of the shell up on top. Alright, so, you know, heat it up a little bit. And then just do a quick, you know, jab and pull. And then go around here to try to pull it evenly. See it's starting to thin out. That's what you want. There we go. So there's a little hole there. We can work with that. take your graphite. You don't even have to use your graphite. If you want to use your fire, you can. Just hit the outside of that hole. Bring it out to about the size of the 8x12, something similar. I'll go ahead and use a graphite to show you that you can do that also. Stick it in, you know, give it a nice roll around. There we go, that should be pretty good. Go around the top and just make it look a little bit more uniform for whenever we put that 8x12 on there. Alright, so I'm going to take this 8x12. Like I said, go in an angle. Hot, you know, get a little stick right there, that way you can go ahead and heat that up and melt it in on the inside and just bring it down to the rest of the tube. That looks pretty good there. There's going to be some gaps in there, so we're going to have to run more 2 mil feeding around there. I suggest where you stuck it on this back side here, don't start running your bead there because that's already stuck. If you heat that up, this 8x12 is just gonna move all over the place. So just put a little bead, just a little tack somewhere in here, just to keep it in place. That should work. Now you can go ahead and run that weld around that tube. Note it all in good. Don't go too fast here because you don't want to get that whole thing hot. Like I said before, that tube will start moving all over the place on you. So start on one end, slowly work your way around. You can pull your fire out, let it cool down a little bit, and then continue on. A little hole right there. Just got to put a little dab in there to fill that in. That should be good. Make sure it's all blended out really well. Alright, so there you got about half that tube. Well, to let it cool down a little bit. And then go ahead and rotate the lathe. Put your tube down, make sure you don't, sometimes the tube is too long and you hit the lathe. But so now we have access to the other side of this tube. So we're gonna finish this weld around here. I'll just run a little bit, then I'll finish up, move around a little bit, get a better angle on that. Make sure it's all blended out really well. Go ahead and move over here. I got this last little bit on this back side to do. Alright, rotate it back up. Make sure you got this whole thing blended out well. I'll go ahead and burn this bloom away a little bit so that you can see a little bit better. Burn the bloom on the shell. Try to clear it up. All right, so there you have it. This is the fabrication of the torch. I'm gonna have to stop the video here. We're at about an hour right now, and I'll have to start my work day. But the next step, leave this plugged over here because that'll help you with the air. You can work out the air. You can put a plug, tape, something on one of these outlets, whether it's this one here or this one that's inside the lathe. The other one you're going to hook your air hose up to, your blow hose, and just work out your seams really well. And you should have a pretty nice looking torch there. I wish I was there to show you guys and help you out. But like I said before, you guys all have my contact info. You can get a hold of me anytime, and I'm more than happy to walk you through it or help you, send me pictures, whatever you need help with. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks guys, and I hope to meet all of you again, and I appreciate all the attention that you've given me, and I really enjoy being a part of this glass community. So thanks again.